We are live and we are talking about software as a service, or SaaS. Kurt, do you feel a little sassy today?
I do. Sassy about SaaS.
Oh, that's all. Jeff, come on here. How you doing, Jeff?
Yeah.
Jeff is actually a SaaS expert. Jeff, have you explain what all that's about here in a moment?
Okay.
So today we're talking about software as a service. Now, in the past few weeks, we've been talking about a really cool project. It's an onboarding project, and I have some notes up here on the screen. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. It's an onboarding application, and almost any organization will use some type of onboarding application, especially their HR department, right? Onboarding new employees. If you think about it, maybe even every department within the organization needs to have an onboarding application. What if you have clients that you work very closely with, like I do, for my accelerator students? I work very closely with them, and I want to make sure that they've they've been onboarded properly. Perhaps they need to upload some documents about their projects they'd like help with. There's all kinds of stuff. An onboarding application can be used in so many ways. But what I want to do, guys, I want to design this application with you, because somebody out there, I already know 2 of my onboarding students want to get in the business of selling software. And you could do this with PowerApps, no problem. And what I recommend to those students is that use SQL Server as a data source, as a database, so that it's sort of agnostic, or it's flexible to handle any tenant, any environment. It can span environments and tenants. And my organization, let's say my Neese corporation. So I've got Neese for my company, okay? And then I've got PowerLabs.us for my onboarding students. So they have all their sandboxes and Dataverse and their SharePoint stuff. So that's separate. But I want this onboarding application to span both tenants, okay? So also, I'm sure there are going to be some business owners, some organizations that will contact me about this awesome application we're building together, and they want to use it. Well, instead of me, okay, do you have a M365 environment set up? Do you have this? Do you have SQL Server set up? No, I'll just take care of all that, okay? So I could create a domain for them, okay? It doesn't have to be for them. It could be called onboardingsas.com, and I'll install a tenant there for that domain, and all my clients can log in there, and I can create a separate environment for every single one of my customers that want to use the SaaS. And I think we should probably take a step back, Kurt. What do you think? And talk about what is software as a service. Now, I had this little diagram created. Okay, so what is SaaS? You're using software as a service, meaning you're sort of renting software. So M365, all of the licensing and stuff that, with PowerApps, that's software as a service. You pay monthly for it. I do have a paragraph here that I've prepared. Software as a service, or SaaS, is like renting a fully furnished apartment instead of building a house and filling it with furniture yourself. In the digital world, instead of purchasing software to install on your own computer, you access it over the internet, and it's managed by another company. That company being us, for our clients. This way, you don't have to worry about maintenance, updates, or any technical issues. It's all taken care of for you. You usually pay a monthly or a yearly fee for this convenience, just like you would pay rent for an apartment. It's hassle-free way to use software. Jeff and Kurt, what do you think about that? Let's get your take on this.
Well, I want to hear what Jeff's got to say, because I've got a lot to say, and I want to hear what he's got to say first.
So I like it from the standpoint that it's hassle-free. I like that you can set it up to get your company going. And, sometimes they make suggestions of things that maybe you weren't thinking of, things that you need to cover. So, yeah, glad to glad that it throws out there some things to address that you can figure out, exactly the direction you want to go.
And I believe everything's going this way. Azure, Microsoft Azure is their cloud services. So we could spin up a whole server or workstation environment. We can do all kinds of really cool stuff, and it would all be hosted on their servers. You don't have to learn how to build a server. You could do everything yourself. You could build the hardware and have the server in your house. You almost want to get away from that, because if you need to scale up quickly, if you have everything in Azure or Amazon Web Services, typically referred to as AWS, you could have a server and say, I want this server to have a lot more processors and double the RAM and more hard drive space. And it just virtually does it all for you. It's like no hassle. Now, you're going to be paying every month for that. And if you're doing some type of business, typically it's sort of covered. It's the cost of doing business, right? So many things are going this way, and it's going there more and more.
Yeah.
Kirk, do you have anything to add to that?
I got a lot.
I'd like to hear.
I don't, I look at it like this. It's funny how they sell that as, it's stress-free. It's ready to go. You don't have to worry about it. We'll take care of everything for you. That's what that software as a service is. But what they really mean is, number one, I'm tired of you guys stealing by pirating my software. And number two, I want residual income. Because here's the thing, even if you look at it from two sides, even if you've got somebody that's providing these platforms for you to get on, these tenants, these apartments, you still have to go in there and set stuff up. So you're setting up no matter what. Okay. You have, back in the old days, we had CD-ROMs and we put it on there, and most of the time it worked pretty good. It was plug and pray back then, right? It wasn't plug and play. It was plug and pray, right? It's still kind of plug and pray a little bit, so we had the software. The problem was people were cutting their software. They were stealing it, and that was bothering them. And this was a good way to do that. And I remember back in the 90s, when you were working with me at a place, we talked about this. We talked about that this was going to be the future. I had a program that I had to develop, and I talked them into, instead of selling this stuff, let's just rent it or give them a license for 1 year, and we'll provide 24-hour support for that. Remember that? That was kind of like the beginnings of this kind of stuff, right? And we were getting that residual income. And so I just look at that. There's really not, you still have to deal with that. Most big companies, they already have server systems already out there. So guess what they're doing? Now they're using their server to gateway into another server. So, it's kind of funny how it's working. So I really believe in my side, it's really about the companies wanting to have control and wanting to have residual income, which is really nice. We think about a day. I think all these big companies dream of a day when they don't have to do any more development and they can just sit back on their laurels and bring allow the money to come flowing in. We're going to have all of our servers built up. We're going to have all of our software created, and people are just going to buy our software. But that's a pipe dream, because technology is constantly changing, and even the Microsofts and all these other companies you're still having to develop all the time. So, yeah, like I said, I had a lot to say about that.
Yeah, I like it.
I don't know it all. Yeah,
I like it. Yeah, Kurt. I remember back in the late '90s when we were together. We had Visual Basic. It wasn't even Visual Studio just yet, right? Right. We had Visual Basic, and then we had Word and Excel. We had all these things that we would install on all of our workstations. And you actually told me, it's like, here, you mark my word, eventually we'll sell things like Word and Excel over the internet. That's exactly where, we can still install it if you pay more on your workstation. But yeah, a lot of people, you've got Google Docs, and so many things are being sold as a service. And who wants to continuously install some new version once a year, that type of thing? Oh, okay. So Nicole, I actually know her from somewhere. I know she's got a background in doing marketing for a lot of software companies. So those days are gone, and that's absolutely correct. Thank you for sharing that. I like your last name, by the way, Nicole. Okay. The client will still need a basic M365 account. So yes, if I were to sell this onboarding application as a SaaS product, and Nick, you're aware because you're an accelerator student, I would create a domain called thebestonboardingapp.com, and I would create a Microsoft tenant out of that. And if you want to purchase the application and or should I say rent the application, I would create an account in M365 for you, create your own environment, and whenever you use the app that I would install in your environment, I'd probably have automated somehow, some way, once they purchase it, and everybody would be using the same SQL Server database, but the information of what organization they belong to will be filtered out on every screen. It will be tracked inside the application. And that is actually the details that I would like to go into with you guys today. So we're going to take an application that you guys are already aware of that we've been building, and we're in the early stages of the application. So this is probably the best time as opposed to later. The best time to change requirements is before you open PowerApps Studio. And then the next best time is today, or as soon as possible. So anyway, let's look at our entity relationship diagram. Kurt, you know I love my ERDs, right? Yeah. So Nicole's got some more wisdom for us. Older people feared the cloud for years, but SaaS is a great business model. Okay. Very good. Those pesky old people holding us back. So this is our ERD diagram. Yeah, as new generations come in, there's sort of like an older paradigm of thinking. What I sort of like to think, Kurt, is people like you and me, we sort of adapt with the changes and the times, because there are some people, it's like, the whole industry has gone to the cloud, for better or for worse, okay? And some people just have an older mindset of, oh, that's not secure. And, nothing really is secure. If you want to be absolutely secure, you unplug from the internet completely, right? Because if it's connected to the internet, if there's a will, there's a way, with the right hacker in place with the right experience. And there's a little bit of Nicole does not like backing things up to tapes. So it looks like here. Thank you, Nicole. All right, so this is our ERD diagram. So this is what we've been building over time. Now, this last Thursday, me and the accelerator students, we have like a lunch and learn on Thursdays at noon EST, and we actually worked on this application a little bit. So I'd like to pick up from there and look at this ERD diagram, and I might need to zoom in here and look at things more closely. But if I were to create this, now this little model table off here to the side, if I create any new table, what I do is I copy all these columns. That's what that is, but it's not really a part of this ERD diagram. I am going to sort of situate things so we can look at things a little bigger here, so we can look at things. Okay. So at the core of this, we have users that need to be onboarded. So there are users. We have different user types. Okay. We have documents they can upload, and that's based on requirements. So let's say on my first day, there's like, let's call it new hire paperwork. So I need to upload a copy of my driver's license, my social security card, maybe birth certificate, proof that I'm a U.S. citizen, so on and so forth, if you're an organization here in the U.S. So we've got all these different tables here. And if you can just sort of look at the structure of the database, and you can see an assumption has been made, which is this database will just service a single organization. Okay. There's nothing sort of segregating these things out. So if you're going to build something software as a service, you're going to be having multiple clients, different clients accessing the same database through your PowerApps application. Okay. And they're not going to be sharing all their data. You don't want to do that, right? So what I would say, what we need to do with this data design, okay, is create a new table and we'll call it organization. Okay. And an organization could span tenants, could span environments, or it could be just one environment, one tenant, and one organization, one tenant, one environment. Okay. So we could have a little bit of some relationships between actually those three things. Okay. And also, you could have multiple applications accessing this data as well. Okay, so there's a lot of things to think about. Okay, so the first thing that I would want to do is I'm going to open this up. Now, I had this other database open here. So I am going to create a table and I'm going to say organization. Okay, I'm going to create a new table here. And so Jeff and Kurt, I expect you guys to slow me down or ask questions as I go along, um, just in case I sort of go over things a little too quickly here. Okay, so I'm going to go to my model table. My model table has all the columns that I would want in any table. Almost any table. I don't know that I need notes for every single table, but it's there if I want it. It's got all the data types set up. Okay, I'm just going to select those columns there. I wish I could sort of zoom in on this so it's not so small. I guess I could use the tool magnifier, right? Have you ever used the magnifier tool?
No, yeah, I heard you're not. It's not a good idea. All right, so I'm wondering, Darren, if it would be a good idea to take a step back for a little longer on this,
Sure.
and let's talk about, because you said you're going to create this new client table.
Uh-huh.
And this client table is going to be people who are potential tenants. These guys are going to be our tenants, right? And what's going to happen here? This is, and I guess I'm doing this for those that aren't really, they're not really strong yet on relationships and how this all fits together. So what's going to happen is this tenant, all those tables that we created out there, they're going to have to have a tenant ID. Everything we do from the tenant point, he's basically creating a tenant table, and that's going to be, and each one's going to have their own specific ID. Jeff will be a tenant, Kurt will be a tenant, Darren will be a tenant, and we've all bought this software, and we're going to have this. But now we're all going to be sharing these tables. We're going to be sharing every one of those tables that are behind that. We're going to have that tenant ID in. So that's the purpose of him going back and making that table of tenants. So we're going to collect information that for each client, and then we're going to create a key. That's the most important part. We're going to create a key, and that key is going to be placed in every one of those tables that's dealing with the onboarding app. What do you think about that, Darren?
Fantastic. I love it.
Does that make sense to you, Jeff?
Yeah. Yep. I sure followed that.
Because that way, every person is going to essentially have a copy of every table that's out there, because it's all going to be based on your ID.
Right.
Yep.
So I created a table here. In fact, let me just sort of size this down here. I did put the link to our PowerApps community. There's a link at the top, tinyurl/Power Platform Community. So a lot of times with YouTube, if you guys post a question, you guys have an error, you guys are following along and you need a little bit of help, well, YouTube comments really doesn't lend itself for that. So over here in the community, you can post screenshots, even videos, all types of stuff, so you can get better help. So just wanted to let you guys know about that.
And I just want to take the moment real quick just to say good morning to everybody that's out there that's been leaving comments.
Yeah.
Everybody that's out there, say hi.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see a lot of people saying hi. Um, and I'm keeping an eye on the comments. Like, what do you guys think about actually adding essentially what we're going to have is some type of organization ID almost in all of our tables, and we need to filter on that within our PowerApps. So first thing we need is this organization table. Okay. And I am going to maximize this here. Okay, so there is organization. So we've got a name. What other things might we want to keep track of for an organization?
Certainly the date that they onboarded with us, right?
Okay.
And depending on your agreements, you're going to want to do like monthly. You might want to put like the type of business arrangement that you made with them. Maybe it's a monthly lease, kind of like what Nick's got. Is it weekly or is it monthly? Yearly. It could be multi-year. So
okay, so we might have payment terms or membership type. We could almost have a separate table called membership.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we could sort of add on to later. Let's just add at least one column here. Okay. And we will call this something like payment increment. And I think for that, right now, I'm just trying to keep this simple. We could always go back and change. I'm going to varchar 50. Okay. And either we could type something in there or it could be a drop down. So that's the payment increment. So we might say weekly, monthly, annually, that type of thing. Okay.
You also might want to add a field in there for like any kind of special stuff that might be separate from like your normal packages. Like there might have been some kind of a special arrangement for specific tenants. Maybe there was a special that you ran during that time, and they purchased it at a cheaper price than what the normal rate was. And 5 years later, you're looking back going, well, where'd that come from? Well, you've got that data. So.
Yeah, I think for now, so this is what's good about notes is let's say we don't have a field for something that we want to keep track of. We could throw it in the notes. Yep. Almost sort of build this out. So there's a little bit of a CRM system out of this, and it would have anything like communication with this client, with this organization.
Yep.
What about we have a client and they have multiple organizations? That might be a little out there, but you might want to build that flexibility into that.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Nick just made a comment out there. Add it and is active. Boy, I tell you what. That is a really, really important field in here, right?
Yeah. In
because
fact,
you can't
like that so much. I want to add it to this.
Yes, absolutely. You have to. Because we don't want to delete anything, right?
Now, what data type should we make that here in SQL? What's the type that you would use in SQL Server, Kurt, for an is
a char. Data type char.
Okay, yes, so explain to us what a char is. Let's say we're not a programmer. We've never heard the word char before. What is a char?
Well, before I answer that, I want to see if Jeff knows. Do you know what that is, Jeff?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay. So a char is a character. It's one character.
Oh, okay.
One byte. Data type char.
So it's just an abbreviation for a character.
Yeah. And that's in lieu of any kind of a Boolean. Now, I would prefer to use a Boolean on that. Yes or no? But the problem with that is when you're dealing with these DBMSs such as SQL Server and others, that they handle things a little differently with Boolean. So I've learned that data type char is probably the best way to go. What do you think about that, Darren?
So in the realm of Dataverse, which is actually a SQL Server underneath the scenes, there is Boolean type. Now in SharePoint, we have a yes, no, which is actually a true Boolean type of value.
Yeah.
And if you pull a field over from a SharePoint list of a yes, no, it will actually give you true, false, okay, which is a true Boolean. Now, I typed in Boolean. There is no Boolean type within SQL Server. And you probably know this, Kurt. You've probably forgotten more than most people know about databases, to be honest. You probably wouldn't say that about yourself, but I would.
I wouldn't say that.
That's a compliment here.
Thank you.
If you try to create a Boolean in Dataverse, it creates a choice. And in order to reference a yes, no, and it creates a choice of yes, no.
Yeah.
And there's a weird syntax of comparing, saying, hey, if this is yes, no, okay. We don't have that restriction with native SQL Server. We actually have a data type called bit.
Bit, sure. That's even better than a byte.
It is. So, Kurt, what you and I have done in the past when we work on a Dataverse project is we use a char, like a single character, and we put either a capital Y or a capital N. And in our experience, it's worked a lot better than trying to do a choice of a yes, no, and messing with all that. But in SQL Server, we really do have a bit here.
That's good.
So that's good for that. So I'm going to save that model.
Most DBMSs don't have that. That's and what's really good about that is it's really cheap, right? So if you have millions and millions and gazillions of people in there, it's not gonna cost you much.
Yeah. And glad to see Nick. Nick knows what's up. And data team says Boolean. Yeah, and that's essentially what that bit is. So we're going to do a bit there, and then I'm going to copy that because somebody might be a client of ours as an organization, okay? And they might have canceled their membership. Does that mean we want to delete the organization? Would we want to delete this type of data, this type of a record, if let's say they were a client organization 3 years ago, or even last month? Would we just want to go in here and delete the organization row if they canceled? This is a good topic of discussion here, because this affects any application that you build in the future. Do you like to delete data, Kurt?
Nope.
I don't either. In fact, I don't even like to delete code.
Dead is your friend.
Yeah.
What if they come back?
Right.
If they ever, even if it's been 3 years, that fourth year they might come back.
Yeah.
Or what happens when the IRS comes a knocking and like, hey, you said you had all this revenue. Where did all this revenue come from?
Right.
It's like, oh, I had some clients. I'm like, yeah, who are those clients? And I'm not saying the IRS does this, but I'm just coming up with a fictitious type of scenario. You might need to have.
You need to keep track of records for that.
Yeah, historical information. And you think about all the other records that are associated with that inactive organization. Okay. You're going to create orphan records. So there's all kinds of data in all the other tables that reference that organization, and Nick says, keep data for 6 years for the tax man. All right. And Nick's over in the UK. I don't know. It might be the same here for the US. I don't know. I'm not a.
I don't know. I think 100 years is enough.
I want to elaborate just real quick on if they come back. If you keep the record, then you have a history of what you did in the past with them, and then you can have that conversation of what worked for you, what didn't work for you, what can we tweak to make it right for you now, because there's a reason they left, right? And so you can look at that and look at that history and then make the necessary changes moving forward.
Yeah, like that. Absolutely. So yeah, is active is, in fact, if you look at a Dataverse database table, it actually adds that automatically for you. That is active. I think it might be status. I don't know. It's been, I've slept since I've looked at that. So there, I think it's actually status, and it's like active, inactive. It creates that for every table, which isn't a bad idea. Okay, so we have is active here. I think this is good. So what I'm going to do here for this organization is I'm going to save this. I'm going to close, well, I'm going to keep the model open. I'm going to close down the organization table, and I don't need to look at this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add the table to our ERD diagram. There's our organization. I'm going to click add. Okay. And I'm going to need to zoom out a little bit. Now, do we want to keep track of tenants and environments? I would say that's a good idea, because if you are building software, you're reselling software and you're selling it as a service, everything's going to be based on tenants and environments. And you might have a situation like mine, where I want to span my onboarding application across tenants. So I got my organization here and I have all my customers in a separate environment. Yeah. So David says, please describe the hierarchy when you get a chance: tenant, organization, and environment. Yeah. So that is an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. Okay. So let's say you want to use Microsoft products. You want SharePoint, you want Word, you have this new organization you're creating, and you're going to use Microsoft products. Well, you're going to go out and look for, you might do a search on Office 365 or M365 pricing, and you'll get to a page where you pick out the subscription that you want, and you click next or buy. And what you're doing as an organization, you're creating a M365 environment for your organization. That is called a tenant. Okay, a tenant. Now, I'll give you two examples of a tenant. Okay, well, first of all, number one, an organization is my company named Neese. It's a corporation, okay? And I sort of, right now, I do business as PowerApps Tutorial, okay? So even an organization can have different names, or doing business as, okay? So that's an organization. And then I have two tenants. I have one where if you send me an email support, and it comes to me and Kurt and some of my other staff. I got my own email address. I use those products within the Neese tenant. Okay. Now, because I teach PowerApps and I teach all this M365 stuff, I create another tenant for my student clients. Okay. So I am one organization that has two tenants. Okay. Most of the time it's one organization using one tenant. Okay. And let's talk about environment. So if I pull up this thing here, look at how many environments I have. So your environments are right here. And you click on this. So a tenant could have many. I worked for one organization, a government organization that just had one environment, and it was default. Isn't that interesting? So David, let me know if I explain that in a straightforward way that makes sense, the difference between those three things. That's an excellent question as we're creating tables around this. And data is king. You can also do some data analysis by keeping old records, such as keeping track of how long customers have been active. Absolutely. You could add, if I bring up my ERD diagram here, and we could have, so we have a date signed up. We could have date terminated or date canceled. That might be useful. There's all kinds of stuff that you can add based on your use case. Okay. Let's see here. Jess Dev, good morning. Thanks for the video. What will it take to make this database design to work as a part of a multi-web application with single sign-on authentication method that allows users from an organization to log into multiple web applications with one set of credentials? Okay. Well, that seems like we could probably almost do a whole live stream or a whole session on that. Let me see if I can just give a general answer here. You know that you can integrate, actually it would be very similar to what we're doing here. Now the single sign-on, you can handle through in 365, you can, I mean, if you're building a web, now the question, are you building it with PowerApps or are you just building it with ASP.NET, that type of thing. So, I mean, we could go down a lot of different rabbit trails on this, but the database design, okay, and that's what you're asking about. What will it take to make this database design to work as a part of a multi-web application? Okay, and what I'm using as a single sign-on, if you look here within the users table, I have M365 email. So let me make us smaller. Okay, so you see that M365 email. Okay, and that's going to be unique. Okay, that will be the single sign-on. And so the changes that we're making are going to accommodate that which you're talking about. Okay, so we have an organization here. Now,
so Darren, can I got a question about that, because
yes,
one
please.
of the hangups I've got in my mind on how this would work, it would work very well as long as we're in one environment. If we have multiple applications and we have a single sign-on user. But what about multiple environments? Would I be able to span across multiple environments? Because that would be a set of tables for each environment then, right? That you would have to have.
It would.
Unless you had it, I guess you would have an environment field within your user table, right? That would track how many, which environments. Well, you'd have to have an environment table, and then you would have to have it.
We're going to create soon.
Yeah. So, okay. So I guess I answered my own question. So you would have to propagate a set of tables if a user created a new environment, and you would have to be in that, and they were using the same application that everybody else was using, right? So you would just have to be able to do that.
Yeah. So think about my situation. So what you have is you have an organization that can have, there's a one-to-many relationship with tenants. So there's a Neese corporation that has two records in the tenant table. And then in each of those, I know for my Neese.us tenant, I've got an environment out there called Kurt Sandbox, Darren Sandbox, and there's a default. So right there's 3 environments within that one tenant for Neese.
That's right.
And then this organization also owns another tenant called PowerLabs.us. And there's probably 50 different tenants there.
Yeah.
How does it break down even further from there? Well, you have apps within one environment. So I could have one environment for the app admins, one app for the app admins, one app for the users. Okay. And those apps could be in different environments, different tenants, as long as they link up to the same organization. It would still make sense.
So maybe what you just said went over my head, but maybe not. I just wanted to see. So if I've got an app out there called my widget collection out there, and it's collecting widgets, and I've got 5 different environments, I can still have one widget, because now what I'm doing is, instead of having one table that's still each environment, I could actually have a table that's actually tracking the environments that I'm in as well, and have an environment ID for each one of those things, right?
Yes.
And so the environment would only be able to see the items in that table that were applied to that environment.
Yes.
So if I had 5, okay, I'm seeing this now.
Okay, so Kurt, so you took a step back and sort of made sure that you understood that, but you've been in this game for decades. So Jeff, what do you think about what Kurt just said? Does that all make sense to you, or would it be helpful if Kurt sort of repeated that or said that in different words? Because I have people from different levels. So one of the, you're an asset here on this call because you don't come from app development background, right? So
right.
Let me know how that all struck you there as we've been going along.
I don't understand it all.
Well,
Good
that's,
stuff. Very
this
well
is great
put. Well said.
feedback. This is the feedback that we need because
That's right.
Jeff,
That's
I
right.
probably have hundreds. Let's say this video gets thousands of views in the next month or two. You know, I would say at least half, if not 80% of people are maybe at your level with PowerApps. There's a reason why they're watching the videos because they want to learn more about PowerApps or to build applications. So
Right.
it's good that you just told us that. Now, first of all,
Yeah.
Kurt, what exactly is a widget? That's what I know.
It's
And who's
Snuffy Smith.
who's Smuffy Smith?
Snuffy Smith.
Snuffy Smith.
It's just
I know Snuffy Smith.
it's just a fictional character that we can use to represent any person, right? So then a widget would be Snuffy Smith of things. You know, you've got the Internet of People, and then you got the Internet of Things, the IoT. Well, a widget is just represents a thing. So I'm tracking a thing, and I've got an application that tracks a thing.
And are we selling the thing, or are we just keeping inventory of a thing? Give us more of an example, real world type of stuff.
Okay, well, I don't want to get okay. So it's just any kind of thing. Like maybe I'm tracking cars. Maybe I'm tracking cars. I've got an application that tracks cars. You know, but I don't want to get hung up on that. So I think, Jeff, that you probably understand better than you realize, because let's take a step back to the beginning of this thing. You understand the process that every table, you have a table out there called products, right? And each product has an ID. Well, then when you got a table out there called users or customers, and each customer has an ID. And then you have to map that somehow so that each customer can have many products. They can go out there and buy a whole bunch of different kinds of products, right? So
plugging that example into Darren's car detailing app, if you had one customer with multiple vehicles that were detailed, right?
Yep, exactly right. So each service event, right? So if you ever detailed that car many times, you would have each service event would have an ID. But let's go back to the cars that you just talked about. So each car would have an ID, and then each customer would have an ID that would represent. So go like Darren has, like Kurt comes in there with his cars. He's got 3 cars, and Darren's servicing these cars. Well, so each car is going to have an ID, but then Kurt's going to have an ID, and he's going to say, well, go give me all the cars that are applied to Kurt's ID number. So now it goes and collects those 3 cars, right? That's a one-to-many relationship there that we just did. Okay. So now we just take a step back now and we say, okay, well now let's say we've got Darren has he's franchising now. And now he's taking out there and he's got this business out there, and now he's got multiple car detailers, right? So this shop has an ID. Each shop is going to have an ID. And each ID for the shop is going to have a collection of customers that go to this shop. And then each one of those customers is going to have an ID for every car that they have. So now you have a shop ID looking at the customer ID, looking at the car ID, right? It's the same thing. We've just taken a step back farther, right? So now in an environment now he's taking a step back farther now, and he's saying, okay, maybe I want to use a different type of business that's not just detailing. Maybe my product is going to be doing something like, I'm going to be not just tracking that, I'm going to track lawnmowing as well. So now I'm going to use those same set of tables that I've set up for the detailing shop, but I'm also going to set it up for the lawn mowing. So now I've got a type of work ID or a type of service ID, right? Is it the lawn mowing company, or is it? And I'm just throwing words out there that are just coming in my mind right away. So we could come up with better terminology, but it's either going to be a detailing or it's going to be a lawn mowing service. So now I have my work type, and one owner could have 2 of those. He could have a lawn mowing service, and he could have that. Those would be your environments. So if you think about what we're talking about now in Darren's app that he's using right now, we're talking about environments, which would be a different. You got 2 applications looking at the same environment, right?
Right.
So you have your, instead of lawnmowers and Taylor, you're looking at PowerApps and Neese. You know, PowerApps is a whole other operation than this. And so we're looking at two different environments for that. And each one of those would have owners that would have clients that would have customers. Does that all make sense?
Yep. That's better. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay. And it's a lot better to do that when you're drawing up diagrams. I'm trying to do this without a picture. I should. One of these days, I'm going to start that in these live streams. I'm going to start saying, well, Darren, let me share my screen. I'm going to get a little whiteboard out here and start going, you know.
That's what Kurt needs, is a whiteboard behind him.
I do. Or a chalkboard. One of the two. The dust be flying.
Yeah. So I'm trying to do here on the screen is sort of illustrate, Kurt, as you're talking about these things. So this is sort of, you really need to, what I'm trying to do, creating a well-designed, architected, is that a verb? Architected.
It is today. It is today.
It is today. Application based on the M365 environment. You need to understand the architecture of, I think my toddler is busting down my door here, just in case if I go to the screen for a moment. You need to understand the M365 architecture. And what do I mean by architecture? Well, what is a tenant? So if you take a look at, for you accelerator students, I have a really a whole, let's see here. We have a whole module on governance, setting up a tenant, go registering a domain name. So feel free guys to go here and look at this information. And in case you guys aren't in an accelerator student, I'll share the link at the top here. If you'd like to know more about it, there's a link at the top. We go through the domain setup. Okay. And we talk about actually creating the tenants. So you get some of that in here. Okay. But you really do need to understand the architecture. If you're going to be a freelancer and pretty much what you deal with every day is writing a PowerApps application, it's based on the M365 environment, you need to understand it. But maybe they don't already have it. So you need to have these skills like, oh, that's fine. I can set that up in a matter of an hour or two, have everything set up for you. And, enter their user. Now, if they have thousands of users, it'll probably take longer than that. But if they're just a mom and pop shop, of just a family owned organization with maybe 10 or fewer users, it would just take a few minutes, right? But you need to understand, as an organization, and you want to have use applications within Azure, well, you're gonna have a tenant, right? And also there's something out here, which is within an organization, you could have different Azure environments that hopefully are related to these tenants, but I've seen completely sort of separated out in a way. So just sort of FYI on that. Now, the SQL Server that I've created here, that's in my Azure environment. So you can have an organization that could have a tenant set up, or I would set one up for all my onboarding customers, and then they would all be accessing my Azure environment. Okay. Now, what I've been doing, as Kurt was talking here a few minutes ago, is making sure I've got IDs and all these. So you'll see the relationships. So if you see a little, let me zoom in here. Okay. So as you see me add relationships here, do you see this little golden or yellow key? That is the one end of a relationship. So one organization can have more than one tenant. A lot of times it's just one-to-one. It only have one. But in my case, I've got two tenants. Okay. So that's why it needs to be set up that way. It needs to be flexible for kinds of different situations. Even if it's only 1% of the time, it does something completely different. Well, you need to build in that feature to allow for that 1 or 2%. Yeah.
Hey, just a second there, Darren. I just want to make sure Jeff's tracking here. So you notice that he's got in the organization, he's got an ID. That's the key, right?
Yep.
In the organization table, you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And now in the tenant, you'll notice that he's got, as soon as he gets done with that here, in the tenant, you'll notice that he's got organization ID. You see the organization ID?
Mm-hmm.
That is a descriptive field for the ID that's in the organization table. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then he's going to carry that forward into the environment, and you're going to see he's got a tenant ID, right? And then that's going to go along with that.
That connects each one.
It does. It does.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That's you're seeing this is the hardest part. You guys that are out there learning this stuff, man, this is the hardest part of databases right here. If you can get this in your mind and grasp this, the rest is easy. There's nothing you can't do with data. This is the hardest thing right here.
Yeah. In fact, what I might do, so
we're just asking if I can repeat it
again. Well, we'll do everyone one better. I just want to make sure this is fully understood, because
that's right.
I don't want to go on droning on for an hour if what we're trying to present here just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to go on. So we definitely need to have
exactly.
Exactly. I'm going to open this up, okay, and I'm going to give you a real world example. And of course, I'm going to use the same example I have here, which is my organization. So I've got, let's do a rectangle. Hopefully I'm good with paint here. And I can go in here and I can say Neese. Okay.
This, by the way, guys, is what Darren does best. He flies by the seat of his pants, and he's doing really good here. All of a sudden, we just shifted. We said, okay, let's stop here and go. This is what he does best. Good job, Darren.
Oh boy. All right. So that's my corporation. Okay. And so what I do is let's create something with a different color here, and let's do another rectangle. Okay. And I go out and I went and registered. Let's do black here. Up here, and I'll say, hey, Microsoft. Well, actually, first of all, I go out to GoDaddy and I say, hey, is Neese.com available? Nope. What about Neese? Well, I'm based in the US. Is that available? Yes. So that's how I came up with this Neese Corp, is that I got my last name with a .us because I'm in the US, okay? And so I've registered that with GoDaddy, and I go over here to Microsoft. Let me see if I can do some type of a line here with a red color. I go over here to Microsoft. I should have used Snagit is what I should have done, right, Kurt? So what we'll do here is we'll say, hey, Microsoft. Okay, so I've registered that, and then I've got my own email address, and I use Outlook.com, or I use the web-based version of Outlook to access my email and Word and Excel and everything. And then I've got this great idea. I was like, I want to create an accelerator system for serious students, and I want to create an environment for each one of them, so they all have their own database, they all have their own SharePoint, whatever. So they can play. I can turn all the options on for them. They don't have an IT department telling them no. So I create this thing out here called PowerLabs.us. So I go over to GoDaddy and I say, hey, is PowerLabs.com available? Nope, but there is PowerLabs.us. So I registered that. Then I go to Microsoft like, hey, I'd like to create a new tenant, and I'm going to create a bunch of users that are my students. Okay. And so Jeff, you're familiar with this Neese. In fact, you probably have an email address over here, and you're also a student, so you got an email address over here. So you, as a user, you're using two different tenants. You have two different logins, two different passwords, probably. Mm-hmm. Okay, so these are. Let me make this maybe in green. Okay, and I'm going to say. These are tenants. If I can do this right. Control Z. Apparently I'm not good enough with paint to do this properly. Let me draw it right here and try to do this a little bigger and say tenants. These are tenants. And then Jeff over here, I'm going to create, and these are going to be environments. Okay. So as PowerApps, as an example, there's probably like 50 different environments here. Okay. So Darren's got environment, Kurt's got environment, Jeff's got an environment. There's all kinds of environments. In fact, Jeff, I may have given you access to, let's say, 3 of these.
Right.
But not this 4th one. Okay.
Right.
So I'm trying to draw some arrows here. And then within a tenant, let's go in here and let's do text, and let's type in here, Jeff. Jeff's got his own environment here, but Jeff has been doing a great job at learning PowerApps. And let's do little circles. And Jeff creates a bunch of little apps within his environment. So you have yet another relationship. You have a one-to-many relationship here. And then for every row here, you've got perhaps a possibility of a one-to-many relationship here. And then within Jeff's environment, within each of these environments here, you have a possibility of a one-to-many relationship between the environment and all the apps. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so hopefully that makes really good sense there. And I'm going to keep an eye on the comments here. So I'm going to shift things around so we can see things better. So when the user creates an environment, you can capture environment ID and insert value into the environment table. Absolutely. Absolutely, you can. Yeah. So Amer, I see you in the private chat over here. So it says, yes, sir. So it looks like, does that all make sense to you, Amer? Hopefully, maybe that's why you were saying that. Yeah. So in our table, environment table, if you guys didn't notice while Kurt was going into his spiel, for each of these tables, what I was doing was an organization 365 GUID. And so Microsoft uses GUIDs for a lot of things to uniquely identify things. Okay. Here is a tenant GUID. Now this organization ID links up to this ID. This tenant ID links up to the ID from this table. But below that, we've got these GUIDs, globally unique identifier. Okay. And then we have an environment GUID. Okay. Now, do you want better here? We should have another, since I described it here. Kurt, I'll show you what we were doing while you were gone.
Look at that. Pretty pictures. So
we've got an example of an organization. So in each of these 3 tables, each one of these things would be a record. So let's say Neese is an organization. And over here in this tenant, it has 2 records that refer back to this one corporation.
Yeah.
It's one organization. And then let's say, for example, one of these records, PowerApps.us, Jeff's got a sandbox, Kurt has a sandbox, Darren has a sandbox. And within an environment, Jeff can have multiple apps. So there's another one-to-many relationship, right? So for every new PowerApps app, I'm going to go over here to model table, copy all these.
What's really nice about this design is that it's completely open and you're never going to be painting yourself into a corner. You can always expand, always. Yeah.
When I get a GUID, Kurt, should we create that as a text or a number or something else?
Okay, if you're, I'm supposing if in other words, you're not capturing it as a GUID.
So let's say we have a GUID,
yeah,
and we want to put it into this database field called app GUID for an app application. So there actually is a GUID for all of these things. What data type should we use? Should we use a date time, a number, a text, or some other data type?
GUID. Data type GUID.
Okay, you're right. Now it's called unique identifier.
Yeah.
I just want everybody to know that.
So some places don't have, some DBMSs don't have it, have that. And in those cases, I use strings. I use I guess that'd be what would be varchar.
Yeah.
char.
If you can't, if you don't have some type of data type that would hold that, let's say, I don't think SharePoint has a data type. So guys, correct me if I'm wrong, if SharePoint does have a data type for a GUID, but yeah, I'd probably put that in a single line of text, you know? I'm going to call this table name application. And also I'm going to make sure I'm caught up on all these other comments. Mhm.
Okay, just before you go to the comments, I just want to make sure that Jeff, are you clear about comparing why that data type is important, what we're calling it? Like I said, can you compare a string to a GUID?
No, I don't know what I mean, I know what we just covered on that whiteboard, but I don't know. What are you saying with string and a GUID?
So when he's talking about data types, he's talking about like a bucket, the kind of bucket that you can put this information in,
Okay.
right? And different types of buckets work for different types of information. It's kind of like if you're in the real world, you wouldn't put water in a paper bag, right?
Right.
You couldn't put that. It wouldn't hold it very well. It wouldn't hold it. But you could put water in a plastic bag, right? Or in a plastic a bucket. So it's the same type of thing in here too. Okay, so a GUID is going to be. It's not really a number, and it's not really a set of letters. That's why they call it a separate thing. It's called a GUID, and it's a whole nother data type. I can't use it with regular numbers, and I can't use it with regular letters. I have to have a GUID data type. Now I can actually they call it casting, where I can change the type by throwing that GUID into a string, and it will capture the strings. That a string is nothing but letters and numbers, right? Okay. So I can actually throw that GUID, the letters and number collection in that GUID into a string or a text, but I can never compare the two. You can never compare the two. If I have a GUID ID and I'm comparing it to your ID, it will never work. The program can't handle it. Jeff would have to have a GUID ID in order to be able to compare it to any other GUID ID.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I have an example. So in TCL, which is its own language, there is a function called new ID, and that generates a new GUID. Now, if we were inside of PowerApps, we would say GUID.
Yep.
And as a function, it would give us a new fresh GUID, which is guaranteed to be globally unique within the globe, within the universe. And so you have a network card within any computer that you're using. That could be a cloud server. It could be your workstation. Okay. I mean, in this case, it's going to be Microsoft servers out there in Azure. Well, it uses there's actually a GUID, or I should say GUID, because it's actually a MAC address, which looks a lot like these numbers and letters. Almost looks like hexadecimal to me, because there's nothing over an F, right? You don't see a Z or an X or anything in there. So it almost looks like hexadecimal to me, right? So it takes that MAC address, which sort of looks like this, which is supposed to be unique within the world. And then it also, I mean, we could really research this. And I think it also looks at the date and time. It uses some type of randomness to generate a GUID. So very useful in a lot of cases when building apps. Okay. So that's an example of a GUID. And also looking at Nick's comment here. So you have a different office with each of their own environment, so you can report and work separate, but boss can overview it all. Yeah, absolutely. So Nick, you are an accelerator student. So over here, let me get back to my, well, that's not what I wanted. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. I need to close some of these down because it's getting a little too unruly. As long as I've saved, it's going to be just fine. Here we go. So yeah, I have one organization. I have two different tenants. So I'm going to have the onboarding app in Neese's tenant, and also over there in PowerApps.us tenant. And the one over in PowerApps US tenant will interact with you students. And then there's also going to be a portion of this application that's going to sit over in Neese's, where let's say Kurt and I can, Kurt could say, hey, Darren, could you go check up on Nick. He's having a problem with his app. I'm out on vacation today, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no problem, Kurt. And I can pull up, let's say, Nick's record. I can see all the applications he's working on, all of his ERD all his documentation for the app, and review that before I meet with him. Everything's nice and organized. But yeah, there's a portion that is going to be in the different locations and different people, different user roles, and different combination of all these things coming together will be managed inside the PowerApps application. So that's why you guys tune in to a software developer using PowerApps and do some complex things. Is when you get a job to become a freelancer, every project's like this. You're going to have some complexity. You need to know how to put these puzzle pieces together and bring order to people's chaos, bring order to organizations' chaos. You are an agent of order. You're going to organize their data, their information, their business data, so it can be indexed and organized and brought up properly in reports and all kinds of stuff that you need an application for. So David Christian showed up. So guys, he has a great Power Platform channel. He covers all kinds of things, not only Power Apps, but all kinds of other things, Power Automate and a lot of interesting things. So you guys might want to check his channel out as well. Let's see. So if the customer already has an M365, can we use that? Yeah, you can. Yeah. So what's good about this is if you want reoccurring passive income from selling your software, you could go in like, oh, we have our own environment. We don't want to have another login to your system. Let's just put it in here. Okay, that's fine. We'll install it there, but it's still going to point at my SQL Server over my Azure. Or you can work a deal with them where they get they already have Azure, or they already have SQL Server, and they have an IT department that's going to manage it. Okay, well, at that point, you're almost going outside of using software as a service, and you're like just giving them everything. So you might want to sell them maybe a larger or a higher price tag just for a one-time shot. And but the thing is, they're probably going to want updates, any bug fixes, any new features, and that's going to make it a little more difficult. Yeah. So if you manage your own environments, your own tenants, you can just update it one place. Then all your customers, all your clients get all of the updates and bug fixes and everything all together. That's the beauty of this. Okay. Rick says that is some genius domain naming. Well, thank you. Okay. So yeah. So Christoph says, subscription ID, tenant ID, billing ID, organization ID, blah, blah, blah. It's all about relationships. Absolutely. All right. So one thing I wanted to add here, let's do a refresh. Okay. So now we have application. So let's add application to this. And an application will belong to an environment. Okay, so I'm going to go in here. Let's look at the standard view of this. We'll go in and add a column. SQL Server is great. It creates all my ERD diagram, and it's completely bound to the design, the schema. So I'm going to say environment ID. Keep that in int. Also, what I'd like to do is put a URL for the app in here as well. Okay, 1 second.
You getting this here, Jeff?
Yep, I'm following.
Tracking so far?
Tracking.
All right, it's gonna be on the test.
If you're tracking, then I'm pretty sure that a lot of others out there are tracking then too.
Right.
All right. So Jeff, what type of relationship do we have between environment and application? Is it a one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, or is there a mapping table needed?
Is it gonna be one-to-many?
You're asking me or telling me?
Yes.
So Jeff, have you ever created more than one PowerApps application?
Not yet, but I know that I can.
Okay. And would you create that and you create those two apps in one environment?
Yeah. I can still, like in my own sandbox is an environment, right?
Mhm.
So I can create multiple apps in that environment, right?
Okay. So think of a scenario when you're trying to decide what type of relationship you're working with. Do we have one environment and many apps? That's true. What happens if we have one app on multiple environments? Well,
probably not.
I guess you could take and install it in different environments. But what will happen is each one of those apps will have a different GUID. They'll have a different URL. So even though it might be the same source code, it would be a completely separate application. It's sort of like you going to a car dealership, buying a Chevy, driving on a lot. It's like, okay, could multiple dealerships have the same car? Well, yeah, they could all have a Chevy. What's the name of Equinox? Okay, Chevy Equinox, which is an SUV. Yeah, another dealership might have the same SUV, but it's not really the same car. It has a VIN.
Right.
Weird, right?
Right.
So what we have is a one-to-many relationship, just like you said here. So I'm going to say environment ID is going to match up with ID, and it's going to have some pop-ups here for me. Okay, there we go. And I added in here app URL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to column names. I'll hit save. So all the tables that we've created so far, these 4 new fresh tables, and hopefully everybody understands the relationships here, which we've gone into in a lot of depth. Okay, so here we go. We have all this this information here. Okay, now let's look at the application as a whole. So if we go into a user over here, how will we know? How do we tie a user up or relate a user to any of this stuff? Okay. A user can be a part of an organization. I know that, right? Because I have, let's say, my Neese organization. So I'll be tied to that. And I would be tied to, well, here's a question. Can one user be attached to 2 different tenants? Well, I have a Darren at Neese login account. Then I have a Darren at PowerLabs.us. Those are 2 different tenants. So those in theory would actually be 2 different users, because if you look at this record here, there's an M365 email. Okay. So in order for this to be right, I might have different photos and my name would be the same here, So what I would want to do is probably tie a user or associate a user, not necessarily with an organization, but tie that into a tenant. Okay. Because I know, Kurt, in your case for PowerLabs.us, let's say we got 50 different environments. Well, you're set up as an admin over most of those because you help the students as well. Okay. So we would probably have a relationship between users and tenant here. So let's go into this users table. Well, I could actually do it from here. Do standard. And I could add in a tenant ID. Okay. And I'll save it. So it actually creates the column. And then once that's done, I'm going to go in here and go back to column names. Okay. I'm going to click on this tenant ID. I'm going to drag this tenant ID all the way up to ID for tenant. And we're going to have 2 pop-ups. Okay. I'm just going to click OK. I'm going to go with the defaults here. So now we have a relationship between users and a tenant. So I'm going to sort of pause there and just see if anybody has questions about what my thinking process, because ideally, guys, I don't want you guys just to be building an onboarding application screen for screen, step by step with me and sort of copying, pasting, or doing a copycat of everything I'm doing. I want you to understand why I'm doing things. So when you write an application that has nothing to do with an onboarding application, you're creating your own SaaS product with PowerApps, and it's completely different than this. If you understand it, you'll be able to apply it to a different project. And if you don't, you would need me to build, the application that you need to and copy every step. So I'm trying to teach a man how to fish, not give him a fish here. Okay, so so now we have a user tied to a tenant. So let's go look at our users here. Let's just go look at some raw data. Oh, that's big. So we have a John Doe, a Mary Smith, we got a Kurt Larson, and then we got a Darren Neese here. Okay. Well, let's go out and make sure that let's go out and create an organization here. I'm going to right click and say, edit top 200 rows, and we can manually enter some data here. Okay. So I'm going to say Neese LLC. Okay. The change value in the cell was not recognized as valid. Okay. And it wants a GUID. Okay, so here's something there. Like if I try to click off, it's not going to allow me. What we need to do for a lot of these GUIDs is we actually need a GUID in here. So let me go open this up here. And let me see if I can go find there's actually, instead of generating a GUID, Microsoft actually has a GUID for an organization. So I could go do that. I think just for right now, I'm just going to say select new ID. And I'm going to copy this GUID for now and put this, see where do I have a GUID for this table? This should be the only required change field. No, is valid. GUID. GUID should contain, yeah. What am I missing here, Kurt? I hit escape. Oh, it's looking for the GUID right there. You only see that in a live stream, guys. This wasn't live. That would have been edited out. Right. And I've got I got a little, I got some.
Hold on. Unless I was doing it, and then you would leave it in there.
that might be true.
It might be. He does that to me all the time, guys. He's just so mean to me.
It's a form of affection.
Yeah.
Guys show affection, love to others by picking on them, right? Okay, so we've got some, as Kurt would say, we've got some measles. Do you guys see the measles on the screen here? We've got some red dots. Okay, so what's going on here is if you hover over this row was successfully committed to the database. However, a problem occurred when attempting to retrieve the data back after the commit. So if we were just to execute, so this is all based on a select statement. So if I hit execute, okay, it's going to go do a select again. Okay, so this organization has an ID of 1. There's the GUID that I generated and put in there. It is active. And in fact, for the OR key, a lot of times I'll create keys, and it's not supposed to be a unique identifier, a lot like you would think of as a GUID or an ID, but it is something that will never change. So if you wanted to reference it with code, it really should never change. So once that key is put in there, you can refer to it as code and know that that's not going to change. Now, the organization name I might create this as a different type of corp, and this might be a C corp, or I might say Neese's Corp instead of LLC. Well, that may change, But if I keep this as Neese's, it should never change, and perhaps we don't even want that displayed to users in the app. Okay, so right now I've got HTTP : // PowerApps tutorial. That's right. URL. Yeah. Date signed up. Okay, 9/9/23. And annual. Okay. Darren at Neese.us. We'll say that. Copy and do the created by notes. Owned by a great guy. Okay. I'm going to re-execute that. So we've got a real record in here that we can reference now. So it sort of puts it all together once you start seeing this data in here. Okay. So there's the organization. It's an ID of 1. Okay. Now we need to go into, we've created a row here. Now we need to create a tenant. I have, I got one tenant here. Let's go in and add a new record here by editing the top 200 rows that don't exist yet. Now I know the organization ID will be 1. Tenant GUID. I could go and find that. It might take me a few minutes to find it. I don't want to bore you guys. So what I'm going to do is go out here and say, select new ID, and it's going to give me a new GUID. And then I can replace that later. Is active, yes. The name of the tenant will be Neese.us. Try to paste. No, I don't want to paste a GUID. I wanted the Darren at Neese.us. I didn't do something right. Okay, we didn't put a null value in ID. Now that tells me we didn't set that up as an identity, which we should have. Okay, so we need to correct that. So we have tenant. Nope, I don't want to save my script. Exit out. I'll go into tenant and I'll design this. So I set up the ID as the primary key, but I didn't go down in here and say identity specification. I didn't turn that on. That is the auto incrementing number that will happen automatically. Okay, so I'll hit save. I want to keep an eye on the comments here. It'd be interesting to see how you would capture the initial data from a new user and store it from PowerApps using patch. Okay. Well, let's take a look at what we have here in our onboarding application. Okay. Well, if you take a look at our OnStart now, Kurt, I think we covered this 2 weeks ago. So 2 Saturdays ago, we went in here and say automatically add this user if needed. Okay, so now we need to go back and make sure we can maybe dynamically grab what tenant and organization we're in and all that type of stuff. Probably based on their email address, we can find out what organization and tenant they're in, grab those GUIDs and throw them into this table that we create here, the new record inside the users table. So that's how you would do that. Yeah. Yeah, you're creating a new user from SQL. Yeah. Yeah. So we having fun here or what?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to bring up SQL Server Management Studio back. Okay, so we've got that. I'm going to hit save. It keeps on wanting to save that script. So I guess I will allow it to save it somewhere. And we'll just put that right there. No. I won't be able to save everything. So,
If you're getting anything helpful out of this, a comment or even a like really helps the channel and lets people like you know this is good content. Much appreciated.
All right, so the tenant is set up now. And we were entering data into the tenant table. So let's go back in here and look at the top 200 rows. So there's the tenant. Now let's go into environment by editing the top 200 rows. And the tenant ID is going to be 1. What is the environment GUID? Let's go see what the environment GUID is. We'll do a select. Environment's not there yet. What am I? Oh, we need a new GUID. What's interesting, the environment GUID is probably the easiest one to get. Okay. So for example here, if you look up at our address bar, look at this. We've got some stuff going on here. If we go to, let's say, we try to share this app, you're going to see some details for the application. Okay. And you're going to see things in here. Look, there's a tenant ID that's a GUID. Tenant ID. And there's a hint. I don't know what the hint is for. And I think this might be the tenant ID. Okay. There's the app ID. Okay, there's the GUID for the app. So let's say DB6, D89. So those are 2 different values. So there's GUIDs all over the place, you know. So I'm going to put this up here. Environment GUID. Okay, also, here's a little bit of a trick. If you go into this little sprocket here within PowerApps and go to Admin Center, if you're able to manage these things, I've got Darren Neese's environment. If I click on that, look at this. Environment GUID, organization GUID. Okay, so this is what we need right here. Paste that in there. Does like it, of course. And we didn't set this up as an identity. So that's what's going on there. So this is going to be Darren Neese's. Actually, I have an apostrophe in there in environment. Okay, so now we've got an environment there. I'm going to close that down. I'm going to go into environment, design it, and make sure that ID is an identity. Okay, and now that that is done, we've set that up as an identity. I'll hit save. And environment, let's make sure for the application we have that set up as an identity too. A lot of times I forget to do that. Not only did I not do identity, I didn't set this up as a key. Do you see this little key right here up on the toolbar? I'm going to click on that. Okay, so it creates a key out of that. Set that to yes. So we do have an environment. Let's go into the application and let's add a record here. Okay, so the environment ID will be 1. The app URL. Okay, this is my onboarding application. You see at the end of here, there's a little copy icon. I'll just hit copy. Easiest thing to do there is the app URL is active. Yes. What's my app quid? I'm just gonna copy this right here and call that my app quid, because it is. And I'll call this onboarding. Now it doesn't like something here, and that is app URL. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. It is too big for it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this app URL here. I'm going to delete that so it can save it. I'll hit rerun, get my data back. Okay, so that tells us right there, URLs need to be really long. So I think I set it up at 1,000 characters. Isn't that interesting?
That's crazy.
Oh no, I set it up as 10. Way too small. In fact, I'm going to say invar char. Okay, let's set that up as 2,000 maybe. Should be big enough. So I'm going to re-execute this so it gets the new schema changes there. Go and copy that URL again and paste that in, and we should be good there. All right. So what if I throw you all for a huge loop here? And let's say, guys, do you realize that in PowerApps, you don't have the ability to do a join? Coming from a software development background, dealing with relational database systems, joins should be second nature to you if you've written any decent amount of application. So you might want to go, let's say, create a database view within SQL Server that will pull all this information back that's all related. And let's say we've got a user ID here, and we pull all this stuff in. Okay. Kurt, would you care to give us the Kurt spiel on what a join is, why it's important, and why you love joins? Go.
Well, it's how you pull in relationships. It's how you do a one-to-many. A right join. So the right side, right? So the right side is going to be the many. So when they say a right join, the right side is you're joining it to the one. And why do I like joins?
So let's people a real example as you're describing. I don't mean to cut you off at all here. So here is what I like about this website. It's called Coding Horror, and they have a blog entry that's been out there for years. And I love the visuals that they did on this. Okay. So here we have a table A on the left and table B is on the right. Okay. Now on table A, we have a pirate, a monkey, a ninja, and spaghetti. And then they have names. Okay. So maybe, okay, these are pirates here, and then these are just table B. These are just names. Okay. I'm trying to come up with a name of what's on the right side. I wish they would say ninjas and something here like users, or maybe these are on the left. These are user types. Like what role they're in. Are they a pirate, a ninja? Are they a manager? Are they a regular user? Are they an IT? And these are the names of the people. Okay. So Kurt, if you don't mind, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, and perhaps you can be prepared for that. But this is we do great things like that.
Sure. So what are you asking me then? So
school us on joins. Why joins are important, why joins are cool, and why would you use them all over the place?
Okay, so I guess be using your example here. You got table A. I wish I had my little red pen going. If you hit Control 2, yeah. So So on the left-hand side, you have pirates and monkeys and ninjas. And then on the right side, you have the same thing, just in a different order, right? But what you want to do is you want to relate the two together. So you're going to join the things that are in common with the right side to the left side. So when you do a right join, and this is a terrible example.
It is.
A better example is when you have table A would be customers with a customer ID. Table B would be products with a product ID and a customer ID, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yeah. So you would have, so you would have orders, right? You would have products over there that would have orders. And so then you would have a table here that would have the order ID, the product number, the product ID number, and then the customer number. And so what you want to do is you want to bring in what products is customer in table A, the customers in table A, what products do they have? So you would do a right join with the products table and capture all the products that customer got. Boy, that's choppy, isn't it? It just doesn't even sound good coming out of my mouth. I hope you guys aren't totally confused now. So
I did put you on the spot.
Yeah. And sometimes I just can't talk. It has nothing to do with being put on the spot. Sometimes I just can't talk. So really the right join just means it's the many sides. So one customer has many products. So you're bringing in many products to the one side.
Yeah.
And that's the only way. Okay. So in other DBMSs that are non-SQL, Squeal, you don't need to use those joins. See, it's an SQL terminology. Okay. It's so that you can it's very old. It's from like 1972 or something like that when they started it. But it's basically so that you can go out there and grab two tables and bring the information in across a teletype telecommunication system where it just represents letters. So it just brings all the information in across one big table.
Yeah.
I guess I like joins because they're universal. SQL is a standard. It's universal across many DBMSs. So it's good to know joins, learn joins. And it's the hardest thing to learn. So if you can learn joins, especially left joins, if I remember right, a left join is an outer join, right? And then the right join, it's been a while since I've used them.
What I think there's a distinction that really helped me, guys, is the first table that you mentioned. Let's just put that on the left, like they done here. So you got table A and table B. The first table you mentioned is table A, okay? And this is called a left outer join. So we're getting everything in table A and all the matching records over here in table B. But if there's no match between them, we'll just get nulls for the no match, but at least we'll have everything in table A. This is normally what I use 90% of the time, a left outer join. Now, going back up here, if you did a full outer join, you get all the records from both of them, and you'd have nulls all over the place. You know, almost all the time I use that third type. Now, this is an inner join, and we're not saying left or right because we want what's between them. But down here, when we say left outer join, we're getting everything on the left side. The first you mentioned. So left outer join produces a complete set of records from table A with the matching records where available in table B. If there's no match, the right side will contain a null. Okay. Now, if you're not familiar with that terminology, null, that means there's no data there. It's not an empty string. It's just like doesn't exist. Okay. And then you've got something like so we got a left outer join, but we say where table B is null. So that would actually give you something like this. It doesn't give you all of table A. It would give you table A where it does not match with table B, and it leaves off the table B. Okay, so these are some of the terms. If you can sort of get this in your head, it's like Kurt said, it's sort of difficult to wrap your mind around. But once you do that, once you fully understand what we're presenting here, I mean, this is probably the biggest thing to understand. And it's probably the biggest, hindrance that I found with people who are trying to build apps with PowerApps. They don't get it. They're used to spreadsheets, and they try to put all their data in one table, one SharePoint list, or one Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
If you're going to write a good app, you need to learn relationships. And the only way that you're going to be able to pull back and join data together is to use something like SQL Server or MySQL or Postgres, as opposed to something like SharePoint, where you just can't do that. There is no join function. Maybe they will use, add a join function. But the problem with PowerApps having a join function is that you're not delegating that out. You're pulling the data, and if they were to join it, you could sort of join, create your own collection with all these different data sources. But you've got a delegation problem there.
Right. Yeah. And here's the thing. You've got the tools though in PowerApps. You're creating a join. You're just not using the join terminology. You're doing the science of the join with the lookups. That's basically what a lookup's doing. When you say find me an ID, now go over here and do a lookup of all the and a filter of all the ones that you found that ID of. That's basically a join. You're doing a join. So I guess what Darren said was spot on in that, and I kind of want to Kurt phrase it a little bit if I can.
Sure.
Because I just feel like this is really important. A couple of weeks ago, I said the most important thing you can learn is data. Learn data like the back of your hand. I'm going to say that over and over and over again. I don't care what application you're using or whatever. Learn data. That's number one, because if you know data, you can go anywhere with it. And if in order to learn data well, you have to learn how to do this relationship thing, this one to many and this many to many. If you can do those two things in data, then you know data like the back of your hand, essentially. And if you can do that, now you can do the joins. The join is really nothing but a lookup. That's all it is. It's just a lookup. It's SQL's version of PowerApps lookup function is what it really is. Okay, so I guess I want to encourage you guys to just break it down and try to find out how much you don't know about this thing, and then just keep learning it.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, pay big attention to this, because we're going to write a join here. Okay, like I said, the left outer join is what I almost always use. Okay, because this is what I'm going for. I'm looking for this type of pulling back the data in this way. I almost always do it this way. So that's why I screenshotted that and put that into the notes. And also just FYI, for those who are interested, a lot of people are interested in the show note. Okay, if you go to powerplatformlinks.com, you can access everything that I publish here. Okay, so I can publish that, and you're going to see all of that. Okay, home site Power Platform Links, and I've got all kinds of stuff. There's PowerApps, playing in the design, sample projects. Here's the onboarding. We've got, what was the name of this one? Onboarding SaaS in the live streams. So there should be, if I refresh, I should see it. So you'll see all these notes and the images that I put out here for you guys. Okay, so let's look at our ERD diagram here, and I will save this, and it's going to want to save the script file. That's fine. And while it's doing that, okay, okay. So what I want to do is do an organization, join a tenant, then I'm going to join in users, then I want to join in environments, and then join in applications. And I want to see what happens when I pull all that data together, okay? And I'm going to show you how exactly I do that in a query and how I do it nice and neat here, okay? So the first thing that we want to look at, I'm going to do a refresh on the tables. And SQL Server Management Studio is fantastic for doing this, okay? So what's the first table here that we're looking at? I'm going to get rid of that. And this thing right here, I'm going to get rid of that as well. Okay, so organization. So I'm going to find the word organization here. I'm just going to drag it over. I like to drag things like this because a lot of times I misspell things, okay? And I like to put all the field names. Now a star says, hey, just give me everything, Okay, and that's usually not a good idea. It'll be frowned upon in our field, the software development field, for doing that. So I'll show you a better way of working with that here. So we got an organization, and just like you have alias inside of PowerApps, you've got an as keyword. Well, you have an as keyword within T-SQL. So we can say as O. So what I do is I just grab the first letter of the table. You could grab the first 2 or 3 if you want. Typically, you want to keep them nice and short, okay? And then if I've got multiple words in the table name, I'll take the first letter out of each word. That's how typically I do it, okay? And then I'll indent things to structure a way, because a lot of times these queries get really long and really complicated. So it's really important that you structure things right, okay? Another thing I do is it is a sort of a best practice. If you've got a seasoned professional that does a lot of database queries with SQL, you'll notice that all of their SQL keywords are in all uppercase, and that's what I would recommend. Okay, so we have O. So I want all the fields from the O table. Okay, and I just messed something up. I hit the insert key, which can mess things up. I wanted a dot there, okay? So from the O table, which is organization, give me all the fields, okay? And then I'm going to do a left outer join on table B. What's table B? What's the next table over? Tenant, okay? So I'm going to delete table B, and I'm going to go find tenant, and I'm going to drag this over, okay, from tenant, and then I'll say as T. Something else I like to do to keep my code nice and neat is I will tab all my aliases off to the right side so I can see them all together here. It makes it look a little nicer. And this is where you match up the foreign key to the primary key. Okay, so I'll say O organization.id equals T dot organization ID.
Now, Darren, can I just stop you right there?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to review some of these for those of you that are real familiar with PowerApps, but not real familiar with SQL. Just look at this as a lookup. Take this select statement away and make a lookup out of it, right? So you're saying lookup from the organization, right? You're saying you're doing a lookup from you're going to try to find the organization, and then you're going to do the where clause in that is going to be, I am saying that right. I think so. Where it's going to be the ID is going to equal the organization ID.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be that the first parameter would be the organization. That's your table.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'd be a comma. And then it would be the ID equals the organization ID. And that would be go find me that record there. It's the same type of deal. Now, if you're going to do a filter, it'd be the same thing. You would be filtering on from the organization ID equals the organization ID.
Yeah, so we could say T.ID equals 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna make this more like a grid here. So we see all the data from these two tables. Now that just so happens to be, there's a one-to-many relationship, but there's only one record in both. So we're just gonna get one record with all that data from both tables. Now, what I should do, Kurt, I should go out here to tenant and add in my second tenant real quick so we can see what that would look like. So same organization, ID 1. The GUID will be different here. So let me just generate a new, select new ID. Okay, so here's a new GUID that I can use. Is active 1. And this will be PowerLabs.us. Then I'm going to grab this last modified email and put that in there, That allows me to. It wants me to re-execute this because I clicked off the record. Okay. So now we have 2 tenants from the same for the same organization. So I'm going to re-execute that so it looks good. I'm going to go over here for our little query, and I'm going to re-execute this. And now I should see, well, we said tenant. So let's go back and say, in fact, let's not even do any type of filtering. Let's just look at all the data that's meshed up. Okay. So now we have 2 records. Now there's only one organization record. Well, if that's the case, it will be repeated. Okay. Until we get to the tenant data. And the tenant data starts right here with ID. And now the data starts to differ. Okay. Does that make sense? All right, keeping an eye on the comments here. Nick says joins make a record set of the data you need. Absolutely. Data is king. A SQL Server has a query builder for those that have a difficult writing in SQL. That is true. And I don't really like it. Kurt, did you like design? I know back in the day, we wrote a lot of desktop applications that used Access as a backend, and there was a designer there too. So
yeah, I mean, most like DBase 4 had design mode too, but they had this other thing called a dot prompt, and it's like I say, new users are only new users for a little while. Once you learn something, you don't want to use the designer. It's cumbersome. It's good to learn though. It's good to learn with though for people that are having struggles with it.
So if we were to do this using the designer, if you guys can just get used to, look, it's writing our SQL stuff down here. Do you see that? I know it's small. Okay, this is a good point. Data is king. So thank you for bringing it up. And let's just look at this. So we've got, and okay, it understands there's a relationship here. Do you want, you just check off the fields that you want. Okay, there's the tenant name. That's all I want out of organization. I just want the organization name. And down here, I just want the tenant name. Boom. And then what I can do is just execute it, and we'll see stuff down here. Neese LLC, Neese and PowerApps. But that's no fun. That's no fun. If you really want to get in the industry, it's sort of what separates. I think as things get really, much more complex, I wouldn't want to deal with all this. I got used to writing complex queries here. And it doesn't matter if you throw me in an Oracle environment, a Postgres environment, MySQL. I know how to do joins. I may not have a designer, and you're just going to be that much closer to being a seasoned developer.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think Data King. I think Data as King said it really good though. For people that have a difficult time writing in SQL. Yeah. So, when you're first starting this thing out, maybe the query builder is a pretty cool thing, but like you say, you're not going to get anything really complex with that query builder. You're going to have to get better, but usually when you're learning stuff, you're taking one table and bringing in some stuff to it, right? You're doing the basics first, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think you're right, Darren. Once you get going on this stuff, if you're going to become an expert on it, you got to put away the training wheels.
Yeah. If you go into a job interview and say, hey, write us a query, here's the data. There's this and the customers and the sales, and like, where's the designer?
Where's the designer?
Designer, what designer? And like, oh, well, if you right click on it, you get the designer. I don't know how that would reflect on you.
On the other side of that though, is Darren would go into a job interview and they say, hey, show us a query on the designer, and he'd say, what's a designer? He'd go to the interview like, I'm an expert. I don't need this stuff, man. What's a designer?
How do you format and style a PowerApps form? I'll be like, what? You guys use forms? Like, I don't know. I don't mean to diss anybody. If that's what you use, I don't mean any disrespect at all. It's just a difference in, I come from a developer background, so I go about things differently than somebody who perhaps doesn't have my background, And I was taught by this guy here, which I think he teaches things in a way that makes sense long term, and I've been really thankful for the way that he taught me. you know,
Yeah.
and that's the type of, I'm trying to pass on those nuggets. Okay, so we got organization, we have tenant, okay, and we can just keep piling more stuff on. Let's do a left outer join for users, because users ties in to tenant. Okay, now we're going to say add you on, and what I'll say here is we will do a t dot id equals u dot tenant id. And then we'll go up here and let's just use names. That would really simplify things. So we got tenant name, and what about a username? So let's say u dot name. It should look really good here. Okay, so I will execute this. Okay, that's really long. Look at that. So it looks like the user isn't set up here. So if I go back, let me get rid of the designer here. Let's go look at our users database table. Okay, we'll open this guy up. Look at this. There is a tenant ID, and I'm going to set up, let's make all these guys a part of a tenant. Okay, I'll say one there. So now that that data is populated, we'll go back here, and this might make more sense. Okay. Let's say so this is all one tenant with these 4 users. And perhaps the name of the users. We got first name, last name. Okay, so this should be something like John Doe. This should be something like Mary Smith. There we go. So we have 4 users here. So I want that to be represented here. Let's put Darren. Now let's put I can find this. Let's put John and Mary over in PowerApps US. Okay, there we go. Now, so we joined up 3 pieces of information from 3 tables. Okay. Now what do? Let's go back to our ERD diagram. This is why ERD diagrams are so important. I mean, look at all these database tables and what we're all dealing with. It gets complicated. So you need that ERD diagram to get your head straight, to wrap your mind around what you're trying to do with a query. Okay. So we've got organization, we got tenant, we've joined in user, but I also want to join in an environment and an application. Okay. Environment and application. Okay. So left outer join environment. So I'm going to drag the word environment over here as E on. We have a tenant dot ID equals E dot tenant ID. Okay. Over here, we could say, comma, E dot name. Okay, let's see what we get here. Darren Neese's environment. Okay. And if something doesn't match up, we'll get nulls. Okay. So we've got the environment. The next thing we want to do is do a left outer join on application. So we'll do that as a on e.id, I'm sorry, environment.id equals a.environment ID. Okay, then up at the top, the field list will say a.name. Okay, make that a little smaller. I'll hit F5 to run this. Look at that. There's our onboarding app. The onboarding app is inside this environment. This environment has belongs to this tenant, which has these users in the tenant, and it is related to this organization. Okay. So when we get into PowerApps, we don't have to pull in organization, in a tenant, in an environment, in an application to store different data sources. What we could do, guys, I need to close out some of this stuff here. This is making me crazy with too many tabs. Okay. So we have an ERD diagram and we have our query. Okay. So what we could do, you go over to templates. So SQL Server Management Studio. Okay. It has, if you go into the view pull down menu, we've got these different things. So I'm looking for, it's called a template browser. Or the template explorer, you hit Control-Alt-T and it'll bring it up. Now these are all kinds of database objects and things that you can create with code, with script. And one of them is a view. So I can go in here, down here for a view and say, let me create a view. And it gives me this. Okay, here's some code. So what we want to do is, okay, what's the database we're using? We're using the onboarding database. So that's what use does. So you can execute that and it will, see this little drop down? I can access one of two databases, either the master or the onboard. That's what that code does that came over from the template. Kurt's back. And then this is some code that cleans something up. In order to create a view, if it's there, we drop it. So let's create a name for this view. Okay, so we might want to say DBO. DBO is the default schema. Okay, so a lot of things have that prefix DBO dot. And what we'll say here is VW as a prefix, view. And we want to grab org, tenant, then we grab user, then we grab environment, and then app. Okay. And so that could be the name of our view. Okay. And we'll include the DBO. So we're going to do search for it here. And inside of T-SQL, the V means view for an object ID. So that's what's going on there. And if it exists, we're going to drop it. And then here we're going to create it. And this thing is our select statement. We'll go over, we'll grab this select statement. We'll paste it here. I'll zoom out so we can look at it better. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab this over. And then I'm going to put a little word here, go. Go execute that. In fact, if I just select all this, hit execute, it will execute all the code that I have selected there. And it gives me an error here. What's the error? Okay, let's zoom here. Line 3. Well, where are my line numbers? Batch start of line 9, column names, each function must be unique. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so all of these will return a column name of name. Okay, so what I need to do here is I need to start creating some aliases.
Aliases, yeah.
Org name. Okay.
Yeah.
As.
And that makes sense too, because the entire collection has to have a unique set of fields. It's got to know which name to put which thing in,
Yeah.
Because it's creating this one table, it's one big table is what's happening here.
As.
And it's in these cases where I'm really glad you didn't say select star.
No kidding. We would have got all kinds of data and tons of conflicts. Because all these tables have a created by, updated by, all that type of stuff. Notes.
Right.
This last one is app name. Okay, so let's see how we do here. Execute everything. It completed successfully. Where's our data? Well, we didn't ask for the data. We just defined a view and we said create it. That's all we did. So now what we can do, here's where it's okay to say star. Okay, we're going to test it. Select star from a table? No, a view. You can treat view like a table. So I'm going to select.
So you could select a specific field from that view then.
You could. So I could
Very
say
nice.
org name
Yeah,
from that
very nice.
and just get a listing of that.
Yeah. So you use the view to isolate specific data that you're looking for, and then you can do a select statement within that view to further isolate. It's pretty nice. This is a really nice setup, man.
Hey, people pay big money for this stuff, guys.
They do. They really do. I mean,
go out to a job site like Indeed.com and do a search for data analyst or somebody writes database queries and
right.
People pay big money for this. I don't know if it's as much as a PowerApps developer, but probably up there. Never know.
Well, here's the thing. You can be a PowerApps developer, but then you can also be a PowerApps developer that understands SQL and understands SQL Server. And now you are back when I was going to school, I used to see these CPAs that would later become lawyers. And I would think, golly, if you could corner the market on being a CPA and a lawyer, that should almost be illegal. I mean, that's some power right there behind, right? So it's the same thing. If you know how to develop programs, but understand SQL Server very well, that should be illegal. That's like, there's a lot of power behind that. And you can just about name your money right there, you know? I've seen PowerApps developers that know SQL Server go into these big organizations that have DBAs and architects, and they actually go in and do the stuff for them because they can't get it done right. I've seen it done. I've seen it with my own two eyes, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot I could say about that, but I'll bite my tongue for now.
Yeah.
But having other people write your views for you and
Look,
it could be messy if the other person doesn't know what they're doing. And it's sort of frustrating if you do know what you're doing, but IT has things locked down. So no, you're going to do this. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. And use a full stack developer is like, okay, I can do it all. Just give me a little more time. It will work wonderfully rather than whatever. So how do you run the view? Mm-hmm.
I guess I just wanted to say that a lot of people can't do that though, Darren. You know, to be in a position to be able to do that, that's your hourly rate goes way up when you can do both of those things.
Yeah. So Nick asks, how do you run the view from PowerApps? Well, if you were paying attention here a few moments ago, just rewind if you didn't see this, but I went in here, added a connector, SQL Server, and I went over here to the right side and I did a search for VW, which is what I called my view. I started it off with the prefix VW. Okay. There's all my views and I'm going to add it. I am going to blow your guys' mind here for a second. I almost was thinking I could show you guys within this application and I can't because it's reliant on the Dataverse. Okay, so if I bring over just real quick, I start a little app here, called it New Table Control. Kurt, do you know they added a new data control within PowerApps? A grid control that actually looks really cool. It's this guy right here.
I didn't know that. I did. Where's that at?
Does this blow your mind or what?
I love grids. Oh, I love grids.
And we got pagination down here. Look at that. This is a control that I set up, you know, and we got columns. We can sort. Can we filter? What can we do with this, Kurt? Filter by. This is all built in.
Oh my goodness.
So if you guys want to use that, go into upcoming features and you type in here. When I added the control, went to modern. Okay, look at all these controls here. Well, there's a new one. I knew about these. Been out there for a little while. You've had to go in here and say upcoming features and say modern controls and themes. You got to turn that on to get this new tab, modern. Some of the controls I like, some of them I don't. But what you'll notice is if you go back into settings and you go in here and you go get yourself the newest version, okay, you'll see some people start posting about it. You're like, what? I don't see it. Well, you got to go to the latest version. Here, which is I went with, I'm pretty sure I went with this version here, and you might have to reload And then you'll get even more. One of them being the table control here. Where is it? Drop down information, link, progress bar. I'm not seeing it, but it's called, it says controls over here. But is reliant upon, this particular control is reliant upon that you're using Dataverse. But because this other project is SQL Server, we can't use it.
I see that in quite a few different controls that they've got. They really are pushing that Dataverse, aren't they? So,
yeah.
but I really, now, you know, before this they had the data grid, and that's an okay thing. I mean, it's okay. But this looks like it'd be a lot more powerful control.
Yeah. Well, the data table, which I don't like, by the way, but what it is good for is just pulling data very quickly, and that's the reason we do use it. Okay. Yeah. Boom. There's all data. I pulled in the view as a data source. So thank you very much, Justice Dev, for a $10 comment there. Appreciate the database stream. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Well, you're welcome. I don't normally get those here, and usually just $1. So thank you for the $10. I really appreciate that. I'd love to have you over in our free community. So please take a look at that. And even Data is King says there's not enough content about views on YouTube like this. Yeah, so I might have to chop or do like a little excerpt and sort of make it a separate video so people can find it better, maybe, because this is a live stream that's gone over 2 hours here. And Data is King says data table is terrible. I don't use. Yeah, I don't recommend it, but just for this version. But it shows that we can pull over data really nice and quickly from our view. We didn't have to do a join. We didn't have to pull in 4 different data sources. I think we have 5 different data sources if you look at them all. Yeah, we got 5 different columns from 5 different tables. We didn't have to pull in those 5 data sources and try to, if you're going to bind a gallery to that, which one would you do?
Yeah, true.
You'd be doing lookups inside your gallery, making your application really sluggish and everything. So, any other thoughts you have there, Kurt?
No, good stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah. So really appreciate it, guys.
For some reason, YouTube thinks you're going to like this video next. Let's see if they're right. Or you can select this playlist, which I've selected for you based on the content you're currently watching. Guys, got to hurry. Click one of them. Otherwise, YouTube's going to autoplay some other video, which you probably don't want.